The email came like a bolt out of nowhere. It was simple, straight to the point, divorce papers enclosed. I froze. My heart sank into my stomach. I had just returned from a year-long deployment, sent money back home to take care of everything. Our bills, our savings, our future. And this is what I got in return? Divorce papers. My wife, Chloe, who I thought was holding things together while I was away, was ready to tear our lives apart. I hadn't seen it coming. I had always believed in our relationship, in our love, but here I was, looking at a legal document that felt like a punch to the gut. All I could think was, how could she do this to me? I'm Mark, and I never imagined something like this happening. I'm the kind of guy who believes in loyalty, hard work, and honesty. I've always been the provider, the one who takes care of everything. For 5 years, I thought Chloe was the person I could trust, the one I could build a life with. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we always found a way through. I thought we were strong. While I was deployed, I made sure to send money back home every month, to make sure she had what she needed. I thought at least I was doing the right thing. I had no idea that, while I was away, she was building a new life with my best friend, Dylan. I'll admit, when I first read the email, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was some kind of glitch or an automated message. But no, it wasn't a mistake. Chloe had filed for divorce, and she wasn't asking for just a clean break. She wanted everything, the house, the car, even our dog. And worst of all, she made it sound like I was the villain, accusing me of being emotionally distant and uncaring. But here's the kicker. I was out there, serving my country, sending money back, and she was living a lie. The truth hit me all at once. I had been betrayed, and now I was going to have to fight for everything I had worked for. Chloe thought she could pull the wool over my eyes. Well, she was about to learn that I wasn't going down without a fight. First, I tried to keep my cool. I wasn't the type to lash out, and I figured we could settle this without making a big scene. After all, I still cared about Chloe, even though she had crushed me with her actions. But then I remembered something that would change everything. I had a security system in place at our house. It was something I did for peace of mind, nothing major, just cameras that recorded everything. And, in a twisted way, I was glad I had it. Because, you see, I had evidence. Evidence that Chloe wasn't the innocent party in all this. Dylan wasn't just some guy she'd found comfort in while I was gone. No, the cameras had caught them in the act. So, while Chloe thought she could paint me as the bad guy and walk away with everything, I was holding on to something much more powerful than her lies. I had the truth, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. The battle begins. I'm going to take back what's mine. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to see how it all unfolds. How would you have handled this betrayal? Let me know in the comments below. I wasn't about to let this slide. I wasn't going to let Chloe and Dylan get away with destroying everything I had worked for. Chloe had her lies, and I had my proof. The moment I found out about their betrayal, I knew I had to act. But I needed to be smart. I couldn't just go in guns blazing. No, I needed a plan. First things first, I had to make sure the video evidence was secured. I went through all the footage from the cameras in our house. There it was, Chloe and Dylan, in the living room, laughing, sharing intimate moments. It was undeniable. The trust one had put in Dylan, my best friend, had been shattered. Chloe had destroyed the foundation of our marriage, and now I had the evidence to prove it. I could feel the rage building up inside me as I watched the video. It was like everything I had been through, the deployments, the long hours at work, the money I had sent home to support us, had all been for nothing. But in that moment, I realized that I had the upper hand. They didn't know I knew. The first call I made was to my lawyer. I explained everything. The divorce papers, the lies, and most importantly, the footage. "We can use this," my lawyer said. "This is more than enough to challenge her claims in court. We'll make sure she doesn't get away with this." My heart sank. It felt good to hear someone else say it, but I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Chloe had already painted herself as the victim in the eyes of everyone around her. And Dylan was just as guilty. They thought they could get away with it, but not this time. Next, I needed to make sure Chloe and Dylan knew I wasn't going to back down. I sent an email to Chloe with the subject line, The truth will come out. It didn't take long for her to respond. Mark. Couldn't believe it. The same woman who had been planning her escape, the same one who had betrayed me with my best friend, was now begging me to talk? I wasn't interested in apologies. Not after everything she had done. I replied with just one sentence. There's nothing left to talk about. I have everything I need. Then I hit send. A few hours later, Dylan texted me. His message was short and to the point. I know things are bad right now, but I never meant to hurt you, man. I'm sorry. Please, let's talk. It hit me like a slap in the face. How could he even think I'd want to talk to him? After everything he had done? He was my best friend and he had taken Chloe. I didn't respond. Dylan had no place in my life anymore. I didn't need his apology. He wasn't the person I thought he was, and now I saw him for who he really was. A backstabber. The next day, I contacted a private investigator. I needed more than just the video. I needed to know everything that had been going on behind my back. Chloe and Dylan. The investigator did his job quickly. He found out that Chloe and Dylan had been seeing each other for months before I even knew about it. They had been planning this from the start. Chloe had carefully plotted her escape while I was away, knowing exactly how to make it look like I was the one who didn't care. But the investigator found something else, something that would change everything. Chloe had been hiding money in secret accounts, just in case things didn't go as planned. She had already taken steps to cover her tracks, but now I had proof of it all. I sat back and let everything sink in. I knew what I had to do. I was going to make sure Chloe and Dylan never got away with this. I wasn't just going to settle for the divorce. I was going to make sure they paid for what they did. They couldn't run anymore. The days after I discovered the full extent of Chloe and Dylan's betrayal felt like a blur. I had all the evidence I needed. I had the bank records, the private investigator's report, and, of course, the video footage that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Chloe and Dylan had been conspiring behind my back. But even with all this, I knew the battle was far from over. I couldn't just sit back and let this go. They had taken everything from me. My trust, my life, my future. And now I was ready to make sure they faced the consequences. The anger inside me was like a fire, but I knew better than to let it consume me. I was going to get what I deserved, but I had to be smart about it. The next step was to hit them where it would hurt the most, their reputations. I knew I couldn't just rely on a courtroom battle. That wouldn't be enough. Chloe and Dylan were too good at pretending to be the victims. It was time for the world to see them for who they really were. I contacted a few media outlets, reliable ones that wouldn't just print anything for a story. I sent them the evidence. I didn't want to make this a public spectacle, but I knew it was the only way to expose Chloe and Dylan for the lies they had been telling. It was time for the truth to come out. I remember the first time I saw the story hit the news. It was just a small headline at first, but as the days went on, the story started gaining traction. Chloe's affair with Dylan was being talked about everywhere. People started to put the pieces together, and soon enough, everyone knew what had really happened. I had no control over how the media portrayed the situation, but I didn't care anymore. Chloe and Dylan were no longer in control. The truth was out there, and there was no going back. But things didn't stop there. Chloe tried calling me again. I didn't pick up at first. But then, after a few days, I got a message. Mark, please, I know I've hurt you, but I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was scared, and I made a mistake. Please, just let's talk. Couldn't believe it. After everything, after the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal, she was trying to play the victim again. She wanted to talk? No, there was nothing left to talk about. But part of me wanted to hear her out. I wanted to hear what kind of excuse she'd try to give me this time. I called her back. Chloe, I said, my voice calm but stern. You don't get to decide when this ends. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. I've heard enough from you. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. There's nothing left for us to talk about. You took everything from me, and now you'll pay the price. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could tell Chloe wasn't used to hearing me speak this way. She had always controlled the narrative. She was the one who got to decide how things went. But not anymore. I've already told the world the truth. You can't hide anymore. Dylan and you will pay for what you did, and so will you, I said. After that, I didn't hear from Chloe again. It wasn't that I was expecting an apology. It was clear that she had nothing left to offer me. But I could tell, from the way her name was being mentioned in the media, that she was struggling. She had been so careful to craft her perfect life, but now it was all falling apart. People were starting to see her for who she truly was. Then came the day Dylan tried to reach out. It was a text message, but this time, I didn't even bother to look at it. He wasn't my friend anymore. Dylan had been the one who stabbed me in the back, and no amount of sorry messages would change that. I blocked him. I blocked Chloe. I didn't need to hear from either of them again. As the weeks passed, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The court hearings were still ongoing, but the truth had already won. Chloe and Dylan couldn't escape it anymore. They were both suffering the consequences of their actions. Chloe had lost her job, her friends, and the respect she had once had. Dylan was left with nothing but regret and isolation. I didn't feel sorry for them. Not one bit. They had chosen their paths, and now they had to walk them alone. And me? I was moving on. I didn't need to fight anymore. The battle for justice had been won, and now it was time for me to start a new chapter in my life. One where I could finally put the past behind me and focus on what mattered. My future. The days that followed felt like a mixture of relief and tension. I had done everything I could to expose the truth, and the battle had been won. Chloe and Dylan were reeling from the fallout. Chloe had lost her job, and Dylan had nothing left. His career, his reputation, everything was in ruins. But that wasn't enough for me. I still had a few more moves to make. The fact that the public knew the truth didn't mean the job was finished. Chloe and Dylan had gotten away with far too much for too long. It was time to make sure that they couldn't walk away unscathed, even if they tried to rebuild. I wasn't the type to seek revenge in the traditional sense. No, I wasn't interested in making their lives hell for the sake of it. What I wanted was justice, and justice had many forms. For me, it was about ensuring that they never got away with what they had done to me and to the people who trusted them. The first thing I did was take control of the property and finances. The moment I saw the divorce papers, I knew Chloe had planned for this. She had probably thought she could take everything while I was away, that I wouldn't be able to defend myself. But now I was making sure that didn't happen. I contacted a financial advisor and started working on securing my assets. The next step was about ensuring Dylan had no way of escaping his actions. Chloe was long gone from my life, but Dylan was still in the picture, trying to salvage what was left of his dignity. After everything that had happened, I knew Dylan would try to redeem himself somehow. Maybe he thought he could apologize to the right people or make things right with Chloe. But the truth was, I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I did a little digging. A private investigator had already provided me with a report that showed Dylan's financial situation, his connections, and the extent of his involvement with Chloe. There was something there, something I could use to ensure Dylan couldn't walk away from this without facing the consequences. I wasn't interested in ruining his life, but I was damn sure that he wasn't going to go back to his old life without a scar. I reached out to the HR department at Dylan. The HR department took it seriously. They began an internal investigation. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I knew Dylan. A week later, I received a call but when I answered the phone, it was nothing but more excuses. "Mark," I cut her off. "You think now's the time for you to ask for forgiveness? After everything you've done, Chloe." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. "You ruined my life. You lied, you cheated, and you thought you could just walk away with everything. Well, now you've lost it all. And I'm not the one who's going to fix that for you." The silence from her side of the phone was deafening. She had no more words. She knew I was done. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't going to play into her manipulation anymore. I wasn't interested in any more apologies. "Chloe." I hung up the phone and felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her approval. I had already taken back my life, and now I was free. Dylan had no more excuses. Chloe had no more chances. The court hearings were still on the horizon, but I already knew what the outcome would be. Chloe and Dylan thought they could manipulate the situation, but the truth had come out, and there was no going back for them. Chloe's reputation was ruined, and Dylan. I didn't need the court to validate what had happened. I knew I had already won. I had always believed that Chloe and Dylan would pay for what they did, but what I didn't realize at the time was just how deep the consequences would run for them. I had exposed the truth, I had secured the evidence, and I had made sure their lies were unraveled in front of the whole world. But even after all that, I was still in the dark about one crucial thing. How far would they go to cover their tracks? The days after the last confrontation with Chloe and the aftermath of her ruined reputation felt like a strange form of closure. I had no more reason to reach out to her. Her attempts to apologize fell on deaf ears, and I could already see the weight of guilt and regret in her eyes whenever I ran into her in town. But Dylan, on the other hand, he was still trying to act like nothing had happened, still pretending to be the good guy. He thought he could just walk away unscathed, and that's when I realized. The final step in my journey for justice wasn't about the money, the house, or even the car. It was about ensuring they both faced the full weight of their actions. I went to work quietly, methodically. Chloe and Dylan may have thought they were free from any repercussions, but they were wrong. As I watched the local news and saw Chloe still trying to salvage what was left of her career, I realized that the best way to end this was not through the courts or through public shame. It was about getting them to face the very people they'd wronged. I'd known Chloe for years, but I had also known her friends and family, and there was one thing I knew about her. She couldn't hide forever. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the deceit, and the damage she had caused to everyone who trusted her. The people who had stood by her would eventually see the truth. It didn't take long for me to track down a few of Chloe's closest friends. Sarah, one of her longtime college roommates, was shocked to hear about the affair. She had always been one of Chloe's biggest supporters, but now, she was beginning to question everything. I shared the footage with Sarah, every single frame. The lies, the manipulation, and the truth that had been hidden for so long. She didn't say much at first, but when I saw her again, she looked different. There was a weight in her eyes, a realization that her friend wasn't who she thought she was. And that's when I knew. I had done my part. Chloe could try to hide behind her excuses and apologies, but the truth was out, and it couldn't be erased. The next day, Sarah came to me, her voice low but determined. "I spoke to the others," she said. "We can't just stand by anymore. Chloe needs to face what she's done. She can't get away with this." I nodded. She won't. It was clear now that Chloe was fighting a losing battle. But there was still Dylan, the man who had been so easily willing to destroy a friendship for his own selfish desires. Dylan wasn't going to walk away unscathed either. I had already done the groundwork. I contacted his company, got in touch with a few people from his old circle, and made sure the full extent of his betrayal was known. It wasn't about ruining his life, but about making sure he understood that what he did had consequences. When the whispers about Dylan started circulating, it didn't take long for people to stop looking at him the same way. His career, like Chloe's, started to crumble. The damage had been done. By the time Chloe and Dylan finally realized the full scope of the damage, it was too late. They were no longer the people they once were. Chloe was practically a ghost in town, her face now associated with lies and betrayal. Dylan had lost all his credibility, his reputation destroyed. And as much as they tried to rebuild their lives, the damage was irreversible. And me? I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The battle had been long and hard, but the pieces were finally falling into place. Chloe and Dylan had lost everything they thought they could take from me. And in the end, I had reclaimed everything that truly mattered. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, making sure that Chloe and Dylan understood that their actions had consequences, that they couldn't just walk away from the damage they caused. And now I could finally breathe. I had taken back my life. The weight had been lifted, and the last of the chapters had closed. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a just one. The closure I needed had been served. The dust had settled, and while Chloe and Dylan were left picking up the pieces of their shattered lives, I finally felt like I could breathe again. But the anger, the betrayal and the deceit. They still lingered, just beneath the surface. It wasn't over, not yet. Sure, I had won the battle, but there were still the final touches. The little victories I needed to ensure Chloe and Dylan wouldn't escape without understanding the true extent of their wrongdoings. For a while, I focused on getting back to normal, rediscovering the life that Chloe had stolen from me. I began reconnecting with old friends, I focused more on my career, and I even started to go out again. The people who had stood by me, who had supported me through all of this, became my anchor, pulling me back to who I really was. But there was still a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I wasn't done yet. Chloe had been trying to regain some semblance of normalcy, but she was fighting a losing battle. People weren't as forgiving as she had hoped. Her reputation was ruined, and her colleagues who had once admired her now looked at her with disdain. She tried to patch things up with her family, but even they couldn't ignore the truth. Her mother had called me once, asking for forgiveness, saying that she didn't know what had happened to Chloe. I could hear the guilt in her voice, but it wasn't my responsibility to fix things for her anymore. The funny thing was, Chloe didn't even seem truly sorry. She wanted to fix things, but more because her perfect life had come crashing down, not because she realized the harm she had caused. And Dylan, the one who had once been my closest friend, the one I had trusted with my life, he had disappeared completely. No texts, no calls. The guy who used to talk about everything and nothing was now a ghost, hiding from the reality he had created. I'd been hoping he'd have the decency to apologize, but I quickly realized that Dylan didn't know what integrity was. The court hearings were coming up, the final round of legal battles to close everything. I knew I had already won, but I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. Chloe still had her lawyer, still had her last attempts to try and manipulate the situation, but I wasn't having it. The truth was on my side, and I wasn't backing down. I met with my lawyer the week before the final hearing. "We've got everything we need," he said, as we reviewed the final steps. "We'll win this case hands down, Mark. Chloe and Dylan have no ground to stand on anymore. It's over." But I wasn't satisfied with just winning in the court of law. I wanted Chloe and Dylan to understand the real cost of their actions. They needed to realize how deep they had cut into my life, and that the truth always wins in the end. So I decided to go one step further. I started reaching out to Chloe's old colleagues, to the people she used to work with. I sent them the proof, the emails, the video, and everything that painted a clear picture of what had really been happening. It wasn't about getting sympathy, it wasn't about tearing her down. It was about ensuring they knew the truth. I wasn't going to let her leave this behind and get away with it, not after everything she had done. Then came the unexpected call. It was Dylan's boss, someone I had met only a couple of times in the past. He asked me about the situation, and I could hear the concern in his voice. He was a good guy, someone who always seemed to have a sense of decency. "We're hearing things, Mark," he said. "Is it true about Dylan and Chloe?" I didn't hesitate. I sent him everything, videos, text conversations, screenshots, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice as he processed it all. "I had no idea," he said. "We're taking this seriously. Don't worry, Mark. Dylan will not have a place here anymore." I didn't need to get revenge on Dylan. His own actions were enough to ruin him. But knowing that people in his life would finally see him for what he really was, that felt like justice. It wasn't long before Dylan was officially dismissed from his position. His reputation, like Chloe's, was shattered. I wasn't enjoying their downfall, but I knew it was the only way to make sure they couldn't go on pretending to be the people they were not. As for Chloe, she continued to spiral. The story of her betrayal had spread like wildfire, and she was being ostracized in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had no allies left. The life she thought she had built was nothing but a facade, and now the world could see the truth. I didn't need to see Chloe suffer to feel like I'd won. What I needed was the peace of knowing that the truth had been told. Justice had been served. The legal proceedings came to a close with a final agreement. Chloe didn't get half of everything she thought she was entitled to. And Dylan? Well, he lost his job, his reputation, and his place in the life he thought he could rebuild. I wasn't interested in the material rewards. I had gotten what I truly wanted: peace, and the satisfaction of knowing that truth always wins. I never imagined I would be in this position, standing victorious after everything that had happened. For months, I had been living in the shadow of betrayal, in the chaos of deceit and lies, but now, it felt like I was finally free. Chloe and Dylan had been exposed for who they really were, and their lives, like glass, had shattered into a million pieces. I remember the first time I walked into a coffee shop after the truth had come out. I had been avoiding most public spaces for a while, but this time I felt different. The weight that had been on my chest for so long had lifted. I wasn't hiding from anything anymore, and as I sat there, sipping my coffee, I overheard a conversation between two people at the next table. They were talking about Chloe. Her name had come up so many times in the past weeks, but this time, it felt different. This time, there was no pity in their voices. They were talking about the way she had betrayed me about the affair, and the way she tried to cover it up. Felt good. Not because I wanted to see her suffer, but because I knew the world now saw the truth. The world knew what she had done, and as much as she tried to run from it, she couldn't escape it anymore. It was only a matter of time before Chloe reached out again. I had blocked her on all fronts, but she found a way to reach me. A letter. It wasn't one of those heartfelt apologies I had expected. No, this was something different. It was a plea, a desperate attempt to get me to reconsider everything. Mark, I know this has been hard on you, and I know I've caused more pain than I could ever explain. But I need you to understand something. I wasn't in my right mind. I was confused, scared, and I made the worst mistake of my life. Please, can we just talk about it one more time? I want to make things right. It was the same message I had heard from her time and time again. Chloe wanted to clean up her mess, but I wasn't buying it anymore. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I didn't reply. Dylan had already been quiet for weeks, and now, Chloe was trying to undo what she had done. But I had made up my mind. There was nothing left for us to talk about. I wasn't interested in fixing things with someone who had so willingly broken me. Meanwhile, Dylan had gone into hiding. It was no surprise to me. After the story hit the media, after the truth came out, he couldn't hide from his actions. Dylan had tried to contact me a few more times, but I ignored every attempt. His apology didn't matter. There was nothing left between us. He wasn't the person I thought he was. He wasn't my friend. He was a liar and a cheat. I got word from one of his old colleagues that Dylan had been fired from his job. The company had received the same report I had given to the HR department. He couldn't run from it. His actions had cost him everything. And once again, I wasn't the one to ruin him. He had done it all on his own. As the weeks went by, I started to focus on myself again. I poured myself into work, took time to enjoy the things I had neglected while I was trapped in that toxic situation with Chloe and Dylan. I began to feel like myself again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed closure. Not from Chloe or Dylan, but from myself. I had been through hell, and now I was determined to move forward. I made a decision. I was going to take a trip. I had been dreaming of this for a while. Just a simple getaway to clear my mind and regain some perspective. I wasn't running from my problems. I was stepping into a new life. A life where I controlled my destiny, and no one else could ever hurt me again. Before I left, I received one last call. It was from Chloe's lawyer. He told me she had one more request. Apparently, she was asking for a small part of the settlement that I had managed to hold on to. She claimed it was a fair compromise. Couldn't help but chuckle. Chloe was still trying to manipulate the situation, even after everything. I didn't respond immediately. I took my time, thinking about everything that had led me to this moment. She thought I would just roll over, that I would let her take advantage of me again. I finally sent a simple message. There's nothing left for you to take. You've lost everything, Chloe. You only have yourself to blame. That was the final nail in the coffin. I had taken my life back. I had fought for justice, and now it was over. Chloe and Dylan would have to live with the consequences of their actions. I was free. It had been a long road to get here, but now, standing at the end of it all, I could finally take a breath. Chloe and Dylan had lost. They had lost everything they thought they could take from me. They had tried to manipulate, lie, and deceive, but in the end, it wasn't enough. I had fought for justice, for my dignity, and for my peace of mind. And as I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that I had won. Not just the legal battles, but my life back. The final hearing came, and there was no drama left. Chloe and Dylan tried to act like they had any fight left in them, but it was clear to everyone in the courtroom. They were finished. Chloe's lawyer tried to pull one last stunt, suggesting a last-minute settlement, but I was done. I didn't need to settle anymore. I had already gotten everything I wanted, the truth. The judge's final words were simple but profound. This case is closed. I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Mark. And just like that, it was over. There were no more fights to fight, no more games to play. The legal battle had been won, but the emotional weight had already been lifted long before that. As the final gavel fell, Chloe's face twisted in frustration. She had hoped that somehow, by pleading and twisting the truth, she could still have some control over the outcome. But she couldn't escape it anymore. Her lies had been exposed, and Dylan had been just as guilty. It was clear. Their story had ended. The real victory wasn't in the courtroom, though. The real victory was when I realized I was free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, and the heartache. Free to move on with my life, to rebuild what Chloe and Dylan had tried to take from me. The world had already seen them for who they were, and now I could finally move on. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I didn't want to see Chloe and Dylan suffer. I just wanted to move forward. I made a promise to myself that day. I wasn't going to be held back by the past. I wasn't going to let the pain from this chapter define who I was or how I lived the rest of my life. It wasn't just about the things they took from me. It was about reclaiming my power. I wasn't just a victim. I was someone who took control, who made sure the truth came out, and who fought for my happiness in the end. I moved forward, taking the lessons I had learned and using them to become a stronger person. And as for Chloe and Dylan, they were left with nothing. Their attempts to manipulate and control had crumbled. They could rebuild their lives, but the foundation they built would never be the same. As I started this new chapter, I knew that the best revenge wasn't about hurting them back. It wasn't about causing more pain. It was about living my life to the fullest, finding happiness, and leaving the past behind. I had taken back everything they had tried to steal from me, and now I was finally at peace. This journey is over, but the lessons will stay with us. Mark has reclaimed his life, and justice has been served. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice. How would you have handled this situation? Let me know in the comments below.